Welcome to the Heidi Thorne Show. I'm your host, Heidi Thorne, and in this podcast, I share my real-world self-publishing and small business experience with you. So let's get started with today's show. As I'm recording this, podcasts are becoming the hot new content medium. In fact, Apple just put out a press release that said there are 1 million shows on Apple Podcasts. I think only a couple years ago there maybe was 500,000. So it's growing at an alarming rate. But is anyone making money with podcasts? First, let's talk about the ways that podcasts can make money. Not that they will, but they can. The first one is advertising. Now, with advertising, the ads are either read as part of the show or they're inserted as an audio file that is provided to the podcast show by the advertiser. That's how it's been done for a very long time. However, something new has come out more recently called dynamic ad insertion. The old way, the ad becomes a permanent part of the show. With dynamic ad insertion, it works similarly to YouTube, where you're watching a video, or before you watch the video, an ad pops up and it doesn't become part of the video itself. So that's dynamic ad insertion. Now, dynamic ad insertion is available to podcasters often through their podcast host platforms, such as Podbean or Libsyn. All of those types of podcast hosts may have dynamic ad insertion. Not all of them do, but some of them do offer that. And what that does for you as a podcast show host, it allows you to customize the advertising, run it for a limited time, such as for short-term promotions, either that you or the advertiser want to run, so that the show seems fresh and current all the time. So there are some advantages to it. However, the podcast platform that you use for dynamic ad insertion may charge you a fee. The other way that podcast shows make money is through sponsorships. Now, these seem very similar to advertising, and some people use the terms reflexively, but sponsorship is a little bit different. With sponsorship, a thank you to the sponsor is usually read at the beginning of the show, sometimes at other points throughout the show, or at the end. It usually isn't an ad, it's just more of a thank you, although sometimes a sponsor will give some ad copy to the show. These mentions can also be inserted with dynamic ad insertion, so that if you change sponsors at some point along the way, you could change the sponsorship mention as well. Now, the biggest problem with getting advertising and sponsorships is that you have to find the advertisers and sponsors. The downside of podcasts is that they're not getting a lot of traffic. They're still in an early adopter phase. Now, what that means for advertising and sponsors is that their advertising dollars don't go very far with podcasts, except for those that on the really top end of the podcast spectrum that are getting millions of downloads per episode or a month. Those are the ones they're going to target. They're not going to target little shows from new or niche show podcasters. So that's the toughest part about getting advertising and sponsors, is you have to go and solicit that, and most of them are not going to be interested because you just don't have anything to offer them. In fact, I was listening to a podcast by a top digital marketer, and he was saying something like if you don't have maybe 10,000 downloads per episode, you're probably not going to be attractive to advertisers. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but it seems logical because advertisers and sponsors can find other ways of internet advertising that are more measurable and effective and less expensive. The other part of podcast advertising that's problematic for advertisers and which makes selling podcast advertising tough is that listeners are doing other things while they're listening to podcasts. They're exercising, they're walking the dogs, they're driving, they're doing housework, whatever. They have to remember the website or whatever contact method you offer in the podcast. They have to remember that and have to remember to connect. Knowing people's short attention spans and information overwhelm, I think that makes podcast advertising a tough sell as well. The third way that podcast shows can make money is through paid subscriptions. It might surprise you to learn that all of those million shows on Apple Podcasts are offered to listeners for free, and Apple doesn't pay for those shows. Neither does any other podcast app like Spotify or Google's Podcasts or any of those. They don't pay the podcasters. Basically, the Apple Podcast app and those like it are podcast directories. They just stream in the feed of your podcast show and don't pay you to do it. Now, I'm kind of surprised by that simply because Apple Podcasts were part of the iTunes universe, which did accept payments, and there's some theories out there about why they didn't bother, and I don't know if at some point maybe they'll offer some sort of paid option for podcasts on it. Hard to know. But there's one major fact you have to be aware of. There's a lot of free podcast content out there. So if you offer your podcast as a subscription on the likes of Patreon, or is it Patreon? You know what I'm talking about. You're going to have a spectacular product in order to get people to pay to listen to your podcast, because they have a million other options elsewhere that are free. So the three main ways of getting cash money for your podcast show are advertising, sponsorships, and subscriptions. And all of them are difficult. So some people say, well, sell other products and services on your podcast show to help monetize your podcast. Okay, let's look at a couple of those. You may have affiliate links or influencer marketing links, and I'm not a big fan of that sort of thing. But the same problem with advertising is with these affiliate marketing or influencer links. The listener has to remember that link after the show and intentionally go there. So your show probably isn't going to get a lot of traffic. And number two, they have to remember. So I think those are tough. Then some people say, well, you've got online courses and coaching and consulting and other services. Same problem as the affiliate links and the advertiser links. You have to remember. And then there's some who say, well, you can sell speaking services because you're a podcast host. Not all podcast hosts are great public speakers. Just saying. But those that are, it is a great way to create an online portfolio of your speaking ability, especially if you do both audio and video. So in that sense, I think it's great. But getting in-person speaking gigs is a tough sell, because a lot of events want to go with speakers who will speak for free just for exposure. So they're not willing to pay people. And of course, with all the coronavirus stuff, the events world has been turned on its head. So I don't think that's a viable money-making stream from podcasts, at least not right now. Then some people say, well, how about books? You can sell your books. And of course, all we talk about is self-publishing books on this show. Well, not really. Remember, about 1% of your author platform or fan base will buy your book. And that's a probably positive forecast. You can't go by the number of downloads for that 1% of your fan base, because not everybody who listens to your show is a fan. They may just listen to an episode here or there. You have to go by the number of subscribers, and that could be a very small number, simply because there's just a limit to how many shows people can consume. They only have so much time. And generally for new and niche podcasts, the number of subscribers is pretty small. So multiply that by 1% and see how many books you're going to sell. I've also heard that some people like to sell swag. Now, swag is promotional products with your logo or your show's name on, and that's kind of an ego thing, in my opinion. I was in the promotional products business for over 17 years, and I know how expensive this is. And if you're not doing, as I've mentioned for books, if you're not doing a print-on-demand option for the swag or branded merchandise that you want to sell, it could be a money loser for you. So not only would you not be making much money from the show, you'd be losing it by spending it all on swag. So I don't think any of those are big money-making options at all. But the biggest problem with podcasts is that you have the double whammy with marketing. You have to market it for advertisers and sponsors, and you also have to build your subscriber base, whether that's paid or free, in order to be attractive to advertisers and sponsors. So your marketing costs are double, and one could cancel out the other. You could end up in the zero profit zone, even at a loss. So do a podcast because you want to keep connected with your fans, because you love doing it, and you have a message to share with the world. Don't do it because you think you're going to make a lot of money. And of course, I've harped on this about books. It's the same thing for podcasts. So I hope you have found this helpful as you think about doing a podcast show or monetizing your show. And if you found it helpful, please go over to Apple Podcasts and rate, review, and subscribe to The Heidi Thorne Show. I'm also on Google Podcast and Spotify and Stitcher and Podbean, so subscribe wherever you like it. And if you like the video version better, that's fine. Just subscribe to my Heidi Thorne YouTube channel, turn on the notifications so that you get an alert when a new video is available. And of course, please share the Heidi Thorne Show, video or audio, with your friends on social media. My self-published books are available on Amazon, Audible, and Apple Books. All you have to do is search for my Heidi Thorne author page, and all my books will be listed there. If you'd like to connect with me, my website, and you should be able to remember this, is HeidiThorne.com. Thank you so much for listening and for your support. I'll look forward to talking with you again in the next episode. And in the meantime, have a great day.